Hello and welcome back to an episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me, Omid Pakseresht. He is the CEO of Goodfolio. Um, Today's topic is a little bit, something top of mind. We discussed it a lot, but there's no harm of repeating this, especially from people who are experts in this field, like Omid. Omid, I don't like to steal much from my guest time, so traditional question. Tell us a little bit more about you, your background, your journey, and what you're currently up to, and then we can start the conversation from there. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. Thanks so much for having me. Um, I'm CEO of Goodfolio. My background is primarily in products and technology, with a particular focus on finance. I've spent the last 10 years or so building AI solutions and scaling AI solutions in enterprise. And so the problem that we're solving is that we think most enterprise AI fails not because the model is wrong, but because the system around it isn't built. So that's what we work on at Goodfolio. Is why we built a platform that solves that problem specifically.
I'm gonna start from where you ended. Can you elaborate more on this because it's very interesting? By saying it's not the model capability, it's systems, decisions, and adoption. Where do you think most teams get this wrong?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's something that we spend a lot of time in live environments and with the prospects and clients actually discussing that specific topic. I think typically what happens is that thanks to let's say vibe coding and improved models, it's become increasingly easy to get a working POC or a version of that live. Um, that almost has become the the easiest part of doing any enterprise AI program, and the part that everyone sort of celebrates because it's quick to see something. Um, but that's actually it's hardly ever where it fails, right? Models in a proper business environment, they don't ship without an audit trail, without data plumbing, without decision rights, without actual buy-in and adoption from the people using it, um, without pipelines, integrations, owners of different aspects of it, you name it. It's really um, it's really hardly ever that sort of like pilot. And to me, that's kind of resulted in a bit of you see a lot of pilots, and then as a result, I mean, everyone sees the numbers. There's also a lot of failed pilots. So you end up seeing a bit of fatigue from enterprise and some leaders. Like, okay, well, I don't want to do another AI pilot. Nothing's really working. So I think it's focusing too much around what that POC looks like, and not enough around what the systems and the processes and the people around it and the integrations and the workflows actually need to be able to do to support that AI initiative.
Right. Now, if you mentioned a lot of, reasons or let's say failure patterns. If we want to rank them between what is technical, what's organizational, or maybe something economical, how do you rank that, Omid?
Oh, that's really hard. And of course, the easy answer to say it depends on the organization. But I would say more frequently than not, it is actually the people and the culture and really how it fits into the workflow that's wrong at the first place. If that's correct or designed with incentives aligned and all the sort of dependencies and frameworks in mind that require to be in place for something to scale, then that's much more likely to scale. What doesn't, at least in my experience, what doesn't end up being the problem that frequently is the quality of AI models.
Right.
They're usually pretty good at the moment.
Now, like any other project, and even the POC itself or the demo, whatever, sandbox, whatever you want to call it, it's a project, right? And so we've seen ownership discussions regarding AI in the enterprise. So where do you think the ownership usually should be sitting when it succeed, and where have you seen it failing when it was sitting in a different ownership, and without, like, of course, finger pointing, but is it like engineering, product, or business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more increasingly so about people and at the moment, and it's kind of, let's say, the line between business and technology is kind of blending into one as well. What I've seen not work, which is the easier to answer, is to view it as a data science project. Um, that is not what it's trying to do. That is not what a AI system is actually trying to do. That doesn't work. So it has to be an element of business and technology involved. But most importantly, if there is a part of the workflow or a system you're trying to optimize, you need to have the people that have the most knowledge about that part of the workflow in the room.
Saying
Otherwise, you're gonna get that wrong very quickly.
Yeah, saying that, Ahmed, how much also is it the feel of urgency from, maybe, let's say, the board or the leaders or the managers? Oh, like, if we don't get an AI project, we're gonna miss out, right? And because we're hearing that companies who are not adopting AI in this or in that, you know catastrophe is coming, and we might go out of business. How much is it also like kind of a reaction to, or let's call it panic mode, um
Mm.
fear of missing out, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, there is a little bit of that, and to some degree, a degree of that is justified, right? If your competitors are actually demonstrating ROI and growing really fast and removing their bottlenecks, they need to worry. What I've seen is that if, if you're doing AI for AI's sake, and if you're trying to push that on the team, push that down, then that is actually, at least from our perspective, having conversations and engagements, it ends up being very difficult to find the right champions. And you need at least one, you need a few to make something happen. But if it is the framing of, if it is focused on growth, and that's what you're trying to do, and this is just, there is an increasingly open opportunity for growth at the moment, then it becomes a much more exciting and fruitful conversation, and moves on a lot quicker.
Right. Now, of course, we discussed kind of the problem. Now let's try to figure out the solution. And within the same theme of shifting from models to systems, and what you just mentioned, in your introduction also, what does a real AI system looks like in an enterprise? Like, and if you can define, like, maybe the minimum components to claim that this is a production grade AI system beyond just the model.
Mm, that's a really good question. I think the biggest distinction really is from a sort of a tool to a system. If you have a system in place, it is actually incorporated into your workflow as a team or as a business unit. So that means that there are parts of the process that are sped up or renewed because of it. That means there are likely multiple stakeholders interacting with the input or output of that thing. That means that it is not something that sits in isolation in someone's laptop for them to improve their copy. So that really, if that is the case and you're in a business, then there needs to be integrations, there needs to be model governance around it, there needs to be evaluation pipelines, versioning for prompt engineering and the models, risk monitoring, all of the stuff that you would expect. Think about it. I sometimes think about it. If you're hiring a new team, you need an HR department around it. But if you're getting an agency or a contractor to do something, it's pretty can't sit in isolation. And one is a system in the traditional sense, and one is just a temporary solution.
Right. Do you see like there's a lot of changes required in the architecture when we move from experimentation to execution to actual production?
It's a good question. Maybe a non-conventional answer here. I am of the belief that the benefit of AI and the best AI systems um, sit on top of and work in collaboration with a lot of existing tools and systems. Um, that is I think we had this phase of everyone wanting to do data lakes. And there's millions and millions invested in creating data lakes without an ROI attached to it. Um, I think the benefit of AI or the framing that you can apply to it now is that you can get to quick ROI really, really quickly. And that's the real difference for me.
Right. Now, let's talk, more in depth about embedding AI into the workflows, right? So, how that looks like in action, right? And how do you make sure that these workflows doesn't get broken by introducing AI? Because you know eh, regardless of the technology, and as someone who sit on the two sides of the table, whenever you introduce a new technology, people expect that something could break.
Mm.
So how that looks into the AI adoption into the enterprise?
Um, I think probably maybe the best way to tackle that one is with an example. So one
Sure.
of the tools that we've created, Inspector, it is focused on compliance of marketing assets with particular focus on regulated industries. So if you think about it, if you say that you work in a bank or you work in a retail bank or an investment firm, anything you put out there, marketing or communication, the compliance department needs to have viewed and approved that. Now that's something that can lead to a lot of back and forth and a lot of delays and so on. What can happen is there's sort of different ways you could tackle that, and organizations are at different stages of their journey. But typically, you would end up having either no processes, just managing it through emails and back and forth and spreadsheets. That's one level. Another level is that you could actually have a, let's say, ticketing system and notifications and things like that to streamline that. Then you could have tools that help, like AI tools that are helping you do the reviews and so on, so helping the compliance officer. Um, and then finally, you could have a slightly different system where compliance becomes, let's say, or agents for compliance become embedded into the process from the get-go, and the role of the compliance officer changes. Now, as each of those kind of like third or fourth stage that I described, the reasons that could go wrong, but some of those reasons are exactly why that process could go wrong without the AI as well, right? Like, so there's some of it is okay. You got to miss risk, right? What is your
Yeah.
appetite for doing that? Right? What type of risk are you okay missing? How do you put checks in place to make sure that doesn't happen too often, or that you catch it quickly enough? So that's one risk is actually not too different to the human risk that existed before, not too different to the risk of the process that was already in place. But the other thing that I think breaks is, again, to think about that example, is that you start moving the bottleneck around, right? So because there is AI now, because you can do AI generated content, you can do an unlimited amount of content really, really quickly. So what happens is that your marketing team's still doing that, and they producing 10 times as much, and your compliance team, it's the same number of people, and now they're just filtering through a lot more information that they have to deal with and review and so on. So the bottleneck used to be, okay, how quickly can you create compliant content? And part of that process, you've made it really quick to create content. But if you don't have tools to deal with that, then that workflow will break, whether that's missing risk or um, or or not having the ability to take advantage of that opportunity with AI and so on. It is really just you've moved into a new type of workflow, and that introduces new types of risks. So that's a more interesting one, I think, to think about.
Yeah, I'm glad because I prepared that question, and now the flow, it came just on the time, about mentioning the regulated environments, right? And this is something I discussed with a lot of other folks here on the show about building the trust, right, and designing the AI in a way where, because we are all calling it, or it's called, I'm not sure who came up with the term, the human in the loop, right?
Mm,
And providing the feedback. Now, when we are shifting, and we should we should I would say, consider, of course, it's like a technology project. It's like you phase it from demo to full production. But in my opinion, AI is not like just another tech migration. It's like, because you just described the marketing case and the compliance. So now my question, Omid, is, in such regulated industries, how you build the trust inside these processes, you know, and what could block AI adoption? Like, people say, "Hey, I would not use this," right? I don't trust it. It's AI. Someone might have seen some news and say, "Hey, like, these models, they hallucinate. How I can make
mm,
sure that this agent or this model or this output will not hurt?" And especially because in regulated environments, we have the audit, we have the compliance that you just mentioned. So how do we make sure that we are making, of course, we cannot claim it's 100% error free, but at least we can reach 99.9999%
mm,
compliance, and in good shape for auditing.
mm. I think we could do a whole separate show just focus on that one question. I love the phrase "human in the loop." It's become a little bit like, um, yeah, it's kind of approached, I think, in reverse order in a lot of instances. It's designed such that the humans become a bit of a gateway to do QA work for the AI, and that's the kind of, it's just saying, okay, this is an AI process we designed. We're gonna go live with this, but oh wait, the compliance needs to approve what happens. And that obviously doesn't really work. That to me at least is the wrong framing of what human in the loop should be. I think there should be an ability, for example, some base principles of, okay, AI is making decisions, our system is making decisions. There should be an audit trail, right? The people who understand that part of the journey, that domain, the best, need to be part of the creation process as much as possible with that AI, whether that's with the prompting or the data that's fed into it, etc. And that actually really works in two ways. One, it ends up being a better system, and two, it ends up buying trust from the people that are eventually going to end up relying on it the most as well. Um, I think there is another thing that this is something that we're actually almost productizing across different use cases that we do, and that's the governance layer around the process. Do you actually understand what your AI is doing? Why it's answering certain things? How it's performing? If it's drifting, does it need retraining? Do you have the kind of the best underlying model? All of this stuff. That is, if it's not already, and it's not already, I think for any major AI system going live in enterprise in a year or two, there'll be table stakes, right? We need to have those governance processes in place. Then it gets a lot easier. Then you're like, okay, well, in the same way as I said, you have a HR department, and in the same way that you have different types of backend processes for people, you have that for AI as well. That's the direction that it's going at least.
Right. Now, of course, when we talk about um, AI projects and or any AI initiative, I would say, and like any other project, so we have deadlines, we have like things that we need to achieve. Um, Now, knowing these, I would call them landmines from compliance and auditing and all this stuff. Like, what is, in your opinion, an acceptable, I would say, threshold between speed and compliance? What have you seen? Like, like, is it like just, yeah, let it break and then we fix it, or no, let's make sure that it's 100%, fine?
Mm,
And how much this will affect actually on the ROI? And the reason I'm asking you, Omid, because, we know traditionally in any project, the longer it takes, people, they will start to lose, I would say, the momentum that they when we started it, and people will start to like, yeah,
mm,
it's dragging forever, it's not ending. And you see the enthusiasm maybe even that started with this project, it start to fade away. So any trade-offs which have you seen that work or should be avoided, I would say?
mm. I think the best kind of approaches I've seen is when people or organizations come into it with an outcome in mind already, and then you can work backwards with what are you actually comfortable with and what are you not comfortable with. Typically, if the outcome is centered around growth, centered around actually be able to go into the areas and so on, then you can define the frameworks in place that allows you to do that. I think there is no real I think that kind of there's the speed and the delays of AI demonstrating the possibility of ROI. That's almost a something that should be done to start with, right? Demonstrate the possibility of ROI, and then working around getting to that outcome. I think those are the two things to optimize for. But the first one can't take long, otherwise, as you said, people lose interest. This is not a full ARP rebuild. It's not something anyone wants to get into right now.
Right. Oh, Ahmed, we kept repeating the ROI, return on investment. What's the best way to measure it? Right. There are a lot of opinions now. Even in the traditional SaaS business, we used to sell licenses and seats, and now people, they start think, hey, should I measure the outcomes instead of just measuring an Excel sheet on how much I'm spending today versus how much I would spend in the future? Funny enough, people mix these two terms together. We know that it's not ROI, it was total cost of ownership,
Mm,
which, yeah, we called it also ROI. Um, but if we want to really measure, what are the best practices to say that economically, yes, this was a really viable project. It helped our company because it did one, two, three. So how do we count these one, two, three, and what they are in usual?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think the interesting part about AI, at least to me, is that it goes back to some first principles of business, which is things that I think were or could have been forgotten with traditional software. So there are things around new business. There are things around growth, and there are things around the levers that affect those things. That's ultimately what your ROI needs to be linked to. Now, we do increasingly, we try to build in a way and deploy in a way that the cost is attached to the outcome. Because if you go back to the sort of the previous conversation, if you know the outcome that you're trying to get, and you're getting AI or building a system that helps you do that, then you should be able to link the cost to the outcome that you're achieving as well. So yeah, I think there's a kind of like a philosophical approach to linking ROI to, or linking outcomes to usage, that's going to become increasingly common in how people view investing in AI.
Right. Now, let's assume we did our first project. It went very successful. We managed to, as we call it in the world of startups, to cross the chasm
Mm,
and shift from just POC and demos and sandboxing to a fully fledged, operating and beneficial project. Now, how, as enterprise, I can scale this? I can take it beyond just one use case.
mm,
Sh- Like, and there are a lot of questions. And by the way, I'm happy because I'm discussing, I think, this with you the first time. People, they get too much into the details, so they focus, I think, on one project, and maybe they spend months, if not years, on just let it succeed without, in hindsight, seeing that, oh, hold on, like we have still whole other things that we where we can, bring AI into. So how we can, as and I'm asking on behalf, of course, of leaders, how we can prepare from the first project this mindset to scale, both from, I would say, planning perspective, and even maybe, I don't know,
mm.
infrastructure perspective or deployment approach perspective. What you can share from what you have seen, Omid?
Yeah, super good. Super good topic to discuss as well. I think it needs to be kind of two directions in parallel. I think one big reason that sometimes AI projects fail is actually the what the organization thinks is happening, whether it's that's with their people or their systems, and what is actually happening are quite different. So when you try to deploy AI into something that the organization itself doesn't understand, then that's it's a little bit more challenging. So I think part of the process is actually trying to identify those gaps, trying to understand your existing processes, trying to understand that AI does a really good job of very quickly exposing inefficiencies and gaps in data coverage, for example, or data accuracy. So really taking those learnings um, to to build on, rather than to do it as a one-off process of I'm going to design this AI that does this part of the process, and not realizing that that's going to expose a that's going to succeed because you understand things better, but it's also going to expose some inefficiencies, and that's just part of the course. And then in parallel, the other aspect of it is really there is a lot of what we just described that is repeatable, right? And that's partly what we're focused on helping organizations to do. But your governance frameworks, your data data catalog, your models catalog, your let's say learnings layer, your model delivery, all of this stuff is something you're gonna do every time, right? So building things in a way that you may be able to do other use cases with it. That's obviously the arts more than a science, but it's definitely sometimes forgotten as an opportunity. And to be fair, wasn't really quite the same characteristics with SaaS, right? You would get a SaaS tool for a department and does a specific job, and the
Mm-hmm.
next SaaS tool is equally as difficult to do for the next department, right? So this is a little bit of a new way of thinking that needs to be applied to this.
Let me ask you something also from your experience, Omid. And is there such thing as an initiative, a project that on paper looks very promising, but actually when you go try and you finish it, or while trying to build it, you figure out that it will not work commercially? There's
Mm,
such situation where you came across, because it ends up like you don't need AI for this, maybe like it's an
mm.
overkill.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, that's happened before. We try to avoid that. We try not to kind of, there's an opportunity cost on to working on stuff that doesn't really have clear linkage to an outcome. And once we go into engagements, whether we're doing a pilot or a deployment or deploy a new product, we do really try very hard to be upfront about what success looks like and what the outcome they're trying to achieve is, and really make sure that at least they're comfortable with it and we're comfortable with it. I think there are there are definitely instances without say going into specific. There are instances that um, organizations are thinking about like second order optimizations and they're kind of entirely missing primary school stuff, right? It's just trying to understand like optimizing certain aspect of marketing strategy, and they don't really know what goes out of the door in the first place, right? So there's just like a big gap between like there's you're not trying to apply AI to something to optimize it. You're trying to apply it to something that doesn't exist, right? One thing that does happen quite frequently, and this is just as much an opportunity that as it is a challenge. Really, I quite enjoy this one, but quite frequently AI gets viewed as a bolt-on, and organizations get kind of, let's say, attracted to that bolt-on proposition. And then in the engagement, it becomes clear that what is supposed to be bolted on, it's not really there or it's not really used. So it then becomes like, okay, well, you want this, but you've just the system underneath it doesn't really do what it was supposed to do. So the bolt on is what are you bolting it on, and that's something to really to think about. I mean, like the dependencies of AI are interesting. For me, as someone who is curious and likes learning new things, is always engaging conversations, and leads into interesting places. And I like thinking about systems and redesigning them and so on. But yeah, can definitely lead to disappointment if you haven't really thought about the outcome and you haven't really thought about the whole system that you're trying to put in place.
Right. Now, what if I'm a leader, I'm the CTO in my organization, or I'm in the decision making position, I would say, and seeing all these things that are changing very fast now. So we started the models, the systems, and now the agents frameworks. What kind of skills I need to focus to have on in my team, so we can keep sustaining and introducing more AI projects? What should I let them go and master?
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think there is a kind of working backwards from the future. Um, I think organizations that will do best are the ones that really focus on growing and refining their edge and moving the sort of, let's say, bottlenecks away from what they sort of organizational ikigai is effectively, right? So then that means that you actually need to have relatively T-shaped people with deep domain expertise in a specific field that are really, really good in the part that you care about as an organization or that department cares about as an organization, but they also have the ability to be entrepreneurial, design new systems, design new processes, and work with others to do that. I saw somehow this was a bit of an overused word a few years ago, but I think now it's even more relevant. I think effectively growth mindsets happens matters more than everything else, because the tools are moving too quickly, right? It's the mindset, the curiosity, the ability to actually understand and apply it that matters the most.
Yeah, and assuming you are a beginner all the time, because like, and this is part of the growth mindset. So because you keep need to learn, learn, unlearn, and relearn few things.
Yeah.
um Omen, like, this is I do in the final moments of every episode, where anything that you wanted to share. Maybe I didn't ask you if you wanted to share that, and where people can get in touch.
Hmm. I think, yeah, no, this has been a pleasure. I'm very, very happy to have been on the show. I think you can visit goodfolio.com to learn more about what we're up to, the platform itself, the philosophy, and the products that we have on offer. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn as well. I've got some content that talks about exactly these topics. So that's a good way to stay in touch.
Great. I will make sure that the link to your profile and to the company Goodfolio is available in the show notes. So people who are listening on their favorite podcasting app, you will find the links in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you will find them in the description. Ovid, like, I can't thank you enough. Really, very content rich, thought provoking about adopting AI in the enterprise. I'm sure like a lot of people will think twice, about everything that was in their head, based on the conversation today. And myself, I learned also a lot from you today. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And this is how I end my episodes. This is for the audience. If you just discovered our podcast, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, give me a small favor, subscribe and share it with as much people as you can. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again to listen or to watch, thank you very much. Again, you taking the podcast 2026, again, I repeat this since last year, to new height. We keep appearing in the top 200 Apple Podcast charts across different countries. And every time I see new countries, I'm happy to see this. Recently, I did a small change. I took the podcast category from business entrepreneurs to technology, because I think this is where we are starting to align the podcast more recently, because we're focusing more on the tech, and AI is of course one of them. Still, despite this, the moment we shifted the category, we made it to the top 200 chart. So I can't thank everyone enough for your support and for your continuous, you know messages and feedback that you keep providing that to me. So thank you very much for this. And as I say always, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.